We start a new course for all humankind. I think everyone's been here to a course before, so you know the works. We're going to pass around the microphone, and if you don't want to read, just pass it to the person next to you when we get to different readings. This course is a great course, and a great course starts with a great sponsor. So I want to thank my very good friend, Dr. Keith Seidel, Preservation Health. I can personally attest to the fact that he's an outstanding doctor. And this is in loving memory of his wife, Vivi, who actually took courses here. Very special woman. And may every moment of all of our collective Torah study stand in her merit. Okay, so the name of the course is For All Humankind. And we're going to be beginning with a discussion of whether Judaism has anything to offer the world at large. And that is I think it's a very serious question, because if you know Judaism a little bit, and we all do, then we, it gives us it seems to be bent in a certain direction, which we're going to point out. So we want to see how Judaism fits actually into the global picture. Are we isolationists, right? Or are we globalists? Would that be the whatever, right? And this may, in fact, challenge some deep beliefs about Judaism that you have. It may not, but it may. It just may do that. And let's begin with a simple, we'll say, poll. So if you go to page number 3 in your book, you're going to see exercise 1.1. On a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 represents completely universal, open to all with a message intended for everyone, and 5 represents completely exclusive, private, insular, and primarily for a select group, where would you place Judaism? So number 1 is universal. Judaism is for the world, right? Number 5 is exclusive. Okay. How many of you lean to the direction of number 1 for the world? Raise your hand. How many of you lean towards exclusive? Okay. Okay. And some of you may know from the name of the course where we're going, so you know which hand to raise. But the question really is a very, very compelling question, actually. Is Judaism a members-only club? And in many, many respects, it would seem actually that there's very compelling evidence to say that Judaism is a members-only club. And let me ask you this question. Is Judaism a very missionary-oriented religion where we proselytize? Chabad rabbi is asking this. Where we proselytize to people outside of our religion? Okay, not at all, right? Right? Other religions, does Christianity proselytize? Yes. Does Islam proselytize? Okay, so we took care of most of the world already, right? And then you have all the other religions that I would assume most of them, if not all of them, proselytize as well. Why do they all proselytize? For a very simple reason. They care about you. We love you, and we want you to be saved. That's the reason why, right? Theoretically, practically, it's coming from a good place, right? But what is it? The Jews just don't care about everyone else. What's the story, right? So, and now Judaism seems to be extremely insular because, first of all, we don't take Judaism out aside of the Jewish people, number 1. Number 2 is, you ever try explaining to a Gentile the laws of keeping kosher? Does that make them feel like they are a part of your tradition or not? You ever tell them, oh, our new year is in September? All right. Is that insular and exclusive, or is that inclusive? Right. Like, Passover, whatever you want. Okay. They came up with something as an alternative to Passover, but we're not, our values don't seem to be like they're very universal values. And To add to this, I'm being very general here, but to get a little bit more specific, we could turn to the Torah itself, and we can in fact see that that the Torah actually expresses this in a number of ways. Let's begin with text 1a, when Moses and the Jewish people were standing at Mount Sinai and we became a people. Okay, so text 1a.
Moses went up to God, and God called to him from the mountain, saying, "This is what you shall say to the house of Jacob and tell the children of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to me. And now, if you will listen to my voice and keep my covenant, you will be my treasured nation from among all the peoples, for the entire earth is mine. And you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you shall speak to the children of Israel."
Okay, so God tells Moses, this is what you should tell the Jewish people right off the bat. This is even before the Ten Commandments start, right? This is what you should tell the Jewish people. So, my treasured nation, does that sound like it is something which is inclusive of all of humanity? Not at all. It's something very unique and special. I mean, we should all know this. It's really beautiful, right? But in the context of our conversation, it really makes it very clear that we are a very inclusive and select group of people. We're a members-only club. Let's go to the next text, 1b.
I am your God who took you out of Egypt from the house of slavery.
I am your God. And by the way, your God here is even singular. It's like God speaking to every single Jew that was standing there. These are the first of the Ten Commandments, right? Who took you out of Egypt? Did God take the Christians out of Egypt, the Muslims out of Egypt? No, he took the Jews out of Egypt, right? So he's saying, I'm your God who took you out of Egypt. God has this unique special relation with the Jews. We have a special relation with God. Seems like it's a very, very members-only club from the verse. And by the way, I'm not negating this. You might think I'm going to flip this all, right? I'm not really going to flip this. All of this is true. All of this is true. Let's read text 1c.
The Torah that Moses commanded us is the heritage of the community of Jacob.
It's the inheritance of the community of Jacob. You know what the community of Jacob is? We are all the descendants of Jacob. Jacob gave birth to the 12 tribes. We are all descendants from the 12 tribes. That's the Jewish people. The Torah belongs to us, to nobody else, right? And all of this really is true. What we're going to see, though, is that it's not the whole story, okay? But before we do, you may have heard of a very a rabbi who had a major impact in the 21st century, and his name was Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. A very, very powerful rabbi, a very great thinker, and in our modern day, and he coined, I think it's the Torah he's referring to. He coined the Torah in this context as our code of difference. Our code of difference. It's really interesting, right? Because the Torah is ours. It was given to the Jewish people. In fact, most of the Torah really doesn't apply to anyone else because 630 commandments, and those commandments were given to the Jewish people, right? Someone who's not Jewish does not have to observe Shabbos, does not have to keep kosher, and on and on and on and on and on. God doesn't ask them to. God doesn't need them to. God doesn't want them to, right? It's not necessary, right? Let's read text number 2.
Jewish law imposes a code of difference. Jews are not to be like all the nations. Internally, this was a source of pride, expressed in Balaam's blessing. It is a people that dwells apart, not reckoned among the nations. Externally, it was a source of resentment, caught in Haman's complaint to Ahasuerus. There is a certain people scattered and dispersed, whose laws are different from those of any other people.
It sounds very much like a members-only club, and in many respects it is. The prophet Bilam, who was a Gentile prophet in the Torah, I'm not going to go through his whole background because of time, but he said a few prophecies in the Torah, and one of them, he famously said, Hein Am, behold, they are a people, Levadad Yishkon, who dwell alone. The Jewish people are not a part of the nations of the world. We are very different from the nations of the world. That is a good piece of that supports, I'm not going to say it's the cause of, but it supports anti-Semitism. The fact that God gave us the Torah, didn't he? Right? God chose us. That supports people who have to justify their unhealthy hearts of hate, right? It actually does come from this, and the story that we just referred to from the story of Esther, our Purim story, right, where Haman tells the king Achashverosh that Yesh Noam Echad, there's one people, right? Vidaseim Shonos, their laws are different than everyone else's, and he was right. We do things that no one else in the world would even conceive of doing, right? Like eating matzah for 8 days, right? Only we can do that, right? So we're definitely very, very unique. Now, we do know, though, that that people who are not Jewish can and do convert to Judaism. So it's not like we have these iron walls around us and there's no way for one to join, right? Let's read text 3a.
What is the meaning of that which is written? He who serves as a guarantor for a stranger shall suffer evil. This means evil after evil will befall those who accept converts.
Wow. This is a strong statement. What in the world does this mean? Right? We do accept converts very graciously. In fact, we know that some of our greatest Jewish leaders actually are descendants of converts. And you might know that Mashiach, the Messiah, is going to be a descendant of who? Of Ruth, who converted to Judaism. So what in the world does this mean? We're going to see from this in just a moment that the way we approach converts is very different than the other religions who proselytize and bring in converts. And that's actually the exact difference. The other nations, what do? They proselytize. What do? We push away. Why do we do that? So here we're going to see exactly why and what this statement means when it says that evil after evil will befall those who accept converts. It doesn't mean that face value. Let's read text 3b.
Evil after evil will befall those who accept converts. Rabbi Yitzhak said this refers to instances where non-Jews are encouraged to convert, or if they are accepted to readily and immediately. However, if they demonstrate a genuine and earnest effort to embrace the faith, we are obliged to accept them.
That's it. We want to make sure, here it is. We want to make sure that when one converts, they want to absolutely be a Jew. Once we know that, open arms, right? But because of that, we push back until they really show that they genuinely want this, right? And this is a very big difference between Judaism and other religions, where they'll do anything to throw the water on you and call you whatever they are, right? In a heartbeat. But we're not that way, which again is an indication that we are an exclusive club. And even though people can come in, but it's done very, very carefully. The burden of conversion, bottom line, is on who? It's on the convert. It's on the convert. And so this all reinforces this whole attitude of it being a members only. So here we're going to pose two questions, and these two questions are going to guide us through the rest of the class. And question number one is, what if this idea of separateness and exclusivity isn't the whole story? It's a strong part of the story, but it's not the whole story. What if it's just one part of a much larger universal vision? And really, as you can tell from the question, that's where we're going here. To understand that, yes, we are a very members-only group in a certain respect. In another respect, we actually have a universal vision that we are responsible for. Never mind that we're responsible for. And what if from its very beginning, Judaism's core mission was to deliver a revolutionary message to all of humanity? Which, of course, we're going to see is the case. And we're going to begin this by contrasting a contrast that some of you may be familiar with from other classes, and that's the contrast between Abraham, who was the first Jew, right, the one to bring monotheism to the world, right, which is a very really at the core part of what we offer to the world, which we'll discuss, versus Noah, otherwise known as Noah, from the flood, Both men that the Torah tells us were righteous men. So we have Noah, right? And why was Noah not chosen to be the father of the Jewish people? Why, in fact, did we have to wait another 10 generations? So there were 10 generations from Adam to Noah, and then there were 10 generations from Noah to Abraham. So we had to wait another 10 generations in order to get the program rolling. Noah just wasn't God's guy yet. What was it about Noah that he wasn't God's guy? He was born into a world that was corrupt. He was born into a world that was immoral, and he was not corrupt, and he was not immoral. He was actually an outstanding individual, what the Torah refers to as a tzaddik, a righteous person, which is a major compliment. So why couldn't he be the father of Judaism, right? The father of the Jewish people. Let's read text number 4.
Noah found favor in the eyes of God. Noah was a righteous man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God.
Do you know what the name Noach means? What does the name Noach mean? Noach, Menachem, Menucha. All of those names are really the same. Rest, comfort, excellent, rest, comfort. So I'm going to lean on comfort, even though both of them are correct. That God says, because the Torah says this, this one is going to bring comfort to us. Because in all of the corruption, there's a man who's righteous. That's why his name was Noach. So he brought comfort. He was righteous. And he did what do righteous people do? They do as they are told. That's what Noah did. He did as he was told. Everything God told him to do, he did. Yet history leaves him behind. What's the difference between Abraham and Noah that Noach, the Torah leaves, God leaves behind? The difference is that Noach focused on his own survival. What did he do? He built a ship because God told him to build a boat, an ark, right? A boat. He builds a boat. Anyone that came and asked him why you're building it, he told them what God told him to say, right? But he really, we'll call him an introvert. He just focused on himself, right? Even though that's not a justification, by the way. So just want to put that out there, but that's what it would seem like. But Abraham was concerned for all, even those who were unworthy. Abraham was so concerned about humanity, he was even concerned about human beings who were unworthy. And I don't know why I feel like the need to say this, but I'm going to say this because of what's going on in the world today, that we should care about everybody. And we should also be able to see when people have made it clear that despite anything we will do to help them, they will still bring destruction to the world. Those people, unfortunately, they are unwilling to take help. So then other things have to be done, but which is unfortunately in a very large measure in the world today. But outside of that, we care even about, we strive to care about everybody, about even people who are unworthy and undeserving and have done things. They have they have an ugly past, etc., etc. If there's a way that we can rehabilitate and help them, right, then we should. And that's what we learn from Avraham, from Abraham, the first Jew. We're going to read text number 5. It's a little bit long, but we're going to read it because it really brings out the commitment that Abraham had, not only to humanity, but to sinners. Let's go ahead.
All right, it is a long one.
Just for you, Joel.
All right. God said to Abraham, the outcry from Sodom and Gomorrah has grown immense, and their sin is very grave. I will descend now and see whether their actions truly match the outcry that has reached me. If they do, I will bring destruction. If not, I will know what to do. Abraham approached God and said, will you also destroy the righteous together with the wicked? Perhaps there are 50 righteous people in the city. Will you still destroy it and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous who live there? It would be beneath you to act in such a way, to kill the righteous along with the wicked, treating both alike. Far be it from you. Shall the judge of all the earth not act justly? And God replied, if I find 50 righteous people in Sodom, I will spare the entire region for their sake. Abraham answered, behold, I have dared to speak to my Lord, though I am but dust and ashes. Perhaps there are 5 fewer than 50. Will you destroy the whole city for the lack of 5? God said, I will not destroy it if I find 45. Abraham continued, Perhaps 40 will be found there. God answered, I will not act for the sake of the 40. Abraham said, please let my Lord's anger not flare up as I speak. Perhaps 30 will be found there. God replied, I will not do it if I find 30. There's a pattern here. Abraham said, behold, I have dared to speak to my Lord again. Perhaps 20 will be found there. God said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 20. Finally, Abraham said, please let my Lord not be angered, and I will speak just once more. Perhaps 10 will be found there. God responded, I will not destroy it for the sake of 10.
Okay. Now, I don't know about you, but if someone came to me and they wanted something and they started down this path and I say, no, 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 at some point they say, listen, buddy, you're a nudnik. Get out of my office. Right. Right. He doesn't stop. And I think that God cherishes the fact that he's still trying to hold on to something out of his concern for people who have demonstrated that they are not the finest of people, to say the least, right? They were corrupt people. They did really, if you're familiar with what they did in Sodom, they were very problematic people. And yet Abraham is insisting on trying to help them in some way. This is a very big statement of the legacy of the uniqueness of Abraham. It's a defining characteristic that he had profound concern for other people. Noah didn't have it, and therefore he did not merit to be the father of the Jewish people, and also the father of monotheism, which is much broader than just the Jewish people. But there's something actually that the Torah tells us about Abraham even before this whole negotiation of Sodom and Gomorrah, and that is the Torah tells us why God cherished Abraham before the story of Sodom. Why does God cherish Abraham? Why does he cherish Abraham? So God tells us. It's always good to, when you're in a relationship, and someone says something that is, I cherish you. We can just smile and say, that's wonderful, right? Because it's wonderful, right? We all like to be cherished. But it's also good to know why, right? It's a little bit helpful. So sometimes we're smart enough to ask, why do you cherish me, right? And this is what God says about Abraham in text number 6. Whoever has them. Oh.
God's love explained. I love Abraham because of his commitment to guide his children and followers to follow God's path and uphold righteousness and justice.
Okay. So God says that I cherish Abraham because he has a commitment to guide his children, his offspring after him, to follow in his path, which is the path of God, which is upholding tzedakah, is the word in Hebrew, which means righteousness. By the way, tzedakah does not mean charity. It means righteousness. Charity is a form of righteousness. And mishpat, and that is justice, right? So Abraham was committed not only to be righteous and just, but to teach it to his offspring. That's the key that we're seeing over here, to teach it to others. That's why Abraham became the father of monotheism. He wasn't just knowing about God. It was, he made a revolution, and he almost got killed for this revolution. It wasn't like it was a popular revolution, which is not for tonight. But he literally was, I would say he was killed but didn't die, is the way I would describe the experience he went through, being thrown into a fiery furnace. So he transmitted a legacy of walking in the ways of God, and which is righteousness and justice. And this is the first Jew at his essence, where there lies the commitment to society with righteousness and justice, which begins to tell us a story. And that is that the very first Jew, Abraham, is already guiding society, because he made a revolution in society. Most of the people he influenced never had anything to do with the Jewish people, because the Jewish people only continued. The only Jew that came out of Abraham was one person, Isaac. That's it. Everyone else was a society outside of the Jewish people that he was influencing to be people who understand that there's a God in the world, and therefore we have to live just and righteous lives. That's what he taught. Now, what was this? What does that mean? You say just and righteous. We consider and argue about what just and righteous means from today until tomorrow, right? What exactly does that mean? Do we have a way of actually qualifying this or making it more concrete? And the answer is yes. And that is something you may have heard of called the 7 Noahide laws. God actually gave, as Maimonides teaches us, God actually gave humanity 7 laws. There were 6 laws that God gave Adam, and then he added a 7th law to Noah. And these are the 7 Noahide laws, and these are the laws for all of humanity that God gave to all of humanity. And as we're going to see, if someone wants to be a righteous human being, otherwise we would call it a righteous Gentile, they abide by the 7 Noahide laws, and they are a righteous Gentile. And that's a major statement to say that someone is righteous. Yeah. Yeah. So the animals were by instruction from God. The animals were by instruction from God. Just a second. And the family is saving yourself. That's natural. Right? Here we have 2 seats together, Anita, right over here. There we go. Oh, it's my honor. Okay. So so the animals God tells him to. So he does it. He followed instructions very well. There are certain people who are very good at following instructions. But when it comes to actually taking initiative, right, it's not there. And part of initiative is caring. I'm not going to say that Noah, he was a righteous man, so he didn't care, but to care enough to go out of oneself and be consumed in the needs of another person at the risk of, to negotiate with God is a pretty risky business, right? In the sense that, if you think about negotiating in front of a king, right? An all-powerful king, which is terrifying, right? If you think a king is powerful, God is all-powerful, right? And but Abraham cared that much, and God, of course, knows the hearts of man. So God really appreciated that. That's how much he cared. So the concrete framework for the universal laws for humanity are the 7 Noahide laws. And we can see a listing of them that Maimonides lists, which is in text number 7a. Whoever's got the mic, go ahead.
God commanded Adam concerning 6 matters. He forbade 1, idolatry, 2, cursing God, 3, murder, 4, illicit sexual relations, and 5, theft. And he instructed them to establish a judiciary. To Noah, God added another prohibition. 7, consuming a limb torn from a living animal.
Okay, so these are 7 laws. Now, what we're going to realize through the course is they seem like simple. Don't bow down to an idol. Don't believe in an idol. Don't curse God. Don't commit murder. Illicit sexual relations, theft, and have a court system. And don't consume the limb torn from a living animal. Okay, yeah, good, right? But what we're going to actually see is that each one of these is actually an underlying broad principle. It's not just an instruction, don't do this. It actually, for example, I'm just going to, we're not going to discuss this tonight, murder, right? When you tell someone do not murder, what are you actually saying? You're saying life is sacred. As we know, not all human beings believe that, right? Never mind that. Never mind going into the parts of the world where they don't believe that. But even in our society, tragically, people fall into mindsets where they will, God forbid, take away another life, right? Something we as a Western society have to deal with all the time, as a civilized society have to deal with. And so, what does valuing life mean, right? It has a lot of connotations. I can go further and further about, sometimes dilemmas dealt with in hospitals, okay, about value of life. So now we're learning about a major perspective, and that's the way all of these are, and they actually guide the world. Now, the Jewish people don't have 7 commandments. Maybe we wish we did, but how many commandments do we have? 613, right? 630 commandments is a very big difference. So how are these seven relevant? Well, they are very relevant. The reason why they're relevant to us is because we are descendants of Abraham. And therefore, we are tasked with the mission to teach the world about the seven Noahide laws, well, about how every single human being can be a righteous person. The same way we have to aspire to be righteous Jews, every human being should aspire to be a righteous Gentile. And I think we'll see as we go through the course, how the world, and never mind even the world, America, the United States of America, will be a drastically improved society if we are able to teach this value system, these seven universal laws just within our country, just within our society. It will be entirely different. Let's read text 7b.
Moses relayed the divine command to ensure that all inhabitants of the world accept the Noahide laws.
Okay. So we are instructed to teach the world the seven Noahide laws. This is Maimonides writes this, right? We have 613, but we also have another seven. And the seven are the seven that we need to teach the world, because this is what makes a world a healthy and a sound place. Let's read text number 8, which let's read text number 8.
It's not just seven. Do not be misled by the number seven when it comes to Noahide laws, even though this number is well known and cited in the Talmud. These seven laws are not seven isolated commands, but seven broad categories encompassing many specific laws. For instance, the prohibition of illicit sexual relations is counted as one Noahide law, yet it includes many distinct prohibitions. Likewise, the prohibition of idolatry is a single law that contains numerous details, and the prohibition of theft covers all conduct that leads to theft, such as coveting.
Yeah, so we can see very simply how each one is a broad value system. So there are a number of things that we've developed up to this point. Okay, and we're going to take the three ideas. Idea number one, there are seven universal laws that apply to all of humanity. Okay, number one, seven universal laws that apply to all of humanity. When humanity does not abide by these seven universal laws, we don't have a healthy society. The general rule is this: God created the world, and God gave us guidance on how to function in this world in a healthy manner. Whenever we deviate from that, we have dysfunction. Dysfunction creates misery. When the world at large does not abide by these seven Noahide laws, we have misery. That's exactly what happens. Number two, it's the Jewish people's responsibility to teach them. Guess what? You know, like the joke about the old joke about the rabbi who gets up on the high holidays and says the synagogue needs a new roof, but don't worry, we have good news, and the good news is we have all the money. But we also have bad news. The bad news is it's in your pockets. Right? So the bad news is, I shouldn't call it bad news, but it's the Jewish people's responsibility to teach them. We know the seven Noahide laws, right? Most of the world actually doesn't, and we have to teach them. So it happens, I'll mention my father of blessed memory was a very big advocate of teaching the seven Noahide laws. And I remember him getting into a big debate with another Orthodox rabbi about our responsibility to do this, being that he was Chabad and the other one was not yet Chabad. But okay. And then the third value is these seven laws form the moral scaffolding of civilization. These seven laws, they create, and this is the point I said earlier, but the moral scaffolding of civilization. We don't have morality without these seven laws upholding justice and compassion. If we want justice and righteousness that Abraham began to spread, we need to abide by these seven laws, because this is what builds morality. Without it, we cannot have morality. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Let's you know what I'm going to tell you, what teachers love to say. So the question is, how did the seventh one, which seems like an oddball one, get into the list? Right. So you're going to have to wait until lesson 4. Now I know I got you for the rest of the course. Yeah, so we're going to get to it. Yeah, so this is really now we're beginning to see that as much as we are on one hand a private club, on the other hand, because there's a part of us, and by the way, this is the nature of all people, right? If a couple gets married, there needs to be an understanding that I am an individual and I am also a part of a whole, right? So now we are one, and I also am still an individual, and that's the only way you can have a healthy relationship. And that's sort of what we're saying here too. We're the Jewish people. We have our 630 commandments exclusively for us. We have a special role in this world. Part of that is actually bringing something to the entire world and including everyone as well. And so here, Maimonides writes about righteous Gentiles, and this is going to explain something I opened with earlier about proselytizing. Why don't Jews proselytize? Well, let's read text number 9. This is really beautiful, in my opinion. It's like stunning, stark contrast between Judaism and other religions. You get this and you see something really big. Text 9.
Anyone who accepts these 7 laws and observes them is counted among the righteous of the nations and has a share in the world to come.
Do you get that? Let me explain what this is saying. This is unbelievable. You know, when a Jew lives a decent life, okay? So what happens after their soul leaves this body? It leaves their body, and it goes to the next world, and it gets a portion in the world to come. In English, we'll call that going to paradise, right? Where the soul experiences the deepest pleasures that a soul can possibly experience, which is high exposure of the divine. Okay, that may not sound very enticing now. You maybe appreciate a pie of pizza more than that, but that's because your body appreciates the pizza, but your soul actually craves exposure of the divine. Now, Maimonides is saying when a Gentile lives as a righteous Gentile, defined as a Gentile living in accordance with the 7 Noahide laws, they too get a portion in the world to come, just like a Jew who's got to follow the 613 commandments, right? Comes to the same place, right? Is there any reason why a Gentile should convert? Not really. Not really, right? I'm going to explain this because I don't want to leave it hanging. Because I want to explain why many Gentiles do convert, and those Gentiles should convert, the ones that do. But there's no reason to convert. It's not like, you see, the other religions, why are they proselytizing? Because they believe if you don't convert, you're damned, right? Right? And they can't get over the fact that you're unimpressed by their terror-stricken fear for what's going to happen to your soul, right? Right? That's what they believe. What do we believe? You don't need to be a Jew to go to heaven. You can go to heaven. Just be a righteous Gentile. Just be the being that God created you to be. You hear the contrast? It's unbelievable, right? It's really the acceptance of all of humanity without judgment, right? You don't need to be, there's nothing wrong with you. You're perfect, right? Just live in alignment. Just live in alignment, right? Now, the reason why there are converts who have converted, who should convert, is because there are certain souls, and this gets a little bit mystical, but there are certain souls which are Jewish souls that go through a unique journey. For whatever reason, God sends them through a unique journey. And that's the reason why these souls have such a strong craving. They can't get up but to convert. So and that's very special. And they accomplish unique things that a common Jew cannot accomplish. But this really explains so much, the fact that a righteous Gentile gets a portion in the world to come. So so what should we do? So, the next step in the class would be, okay, guys, we're hitting the streets. I'm going to give you pamphlets. We're going to start spreading the 7 Noahide laws. Before we do that, though, which is a good thing, by the way, I would say this. The reason why historically the Jewish people have not spread the 7 Noahide laws is because if you just go back 75, 80, whatever, 100 years ago, if a Jew even dared to try and tell a Gentile what they should be doing, right, you'd be risking your life, right? In Poland, in Russia, wherever. I mean, the Jews were really second-class citizens. Would be a compliment to the way we were treated. However, now we are in the great democracy of America, and I say that with all of its faults because it is the greatest of, as I think Winston Churchill said, the best of all evils. I think he described democracy as, or something like that. I don't know, whatever it is. But right, and we are very grateful, especially as Jews, for our great country, and we do have that. Even with all the people who live in some type of a fear that whatever, we have unbelievable freedom. I mean, here we are, right? Unbelievable freedom. And so much so that my father would go on to the New York subway and give people pamphlets about the 7 Noahide laws, right? And people smiled and they took it graciously. And it was, it was a non-issue whatsoever. And my father knew what anti-Semitism was firsthand. Both in Europe and in America. He experienced it in both places. So the first thing we need to do before we go out and do that, or as we're going out and doing that, I'll say, is for us to appreciate the significance and the power of the 7 Noahide laws in bringing morality to the world. Because the more we understand that, the more we realize that literally, I mean, we see what goes on in society. Right? Our Western society is struggling, right? And the answer to that struggle, and the Rebbe spoke about this publicly in many, many times, and used different avenues to try and influence, through education and a moment of silence in schools where people would take a moment to recognize God, where children would take a moment to recognize God, because the Rebbe believed that if every single child was aware that there is a higher being in the world, just that, no religion, just knowing, because we're not proselytizing religion, right? Knowing there's a God in the world, we conduct ourselves, we begin to think very differently. We suddenly realize I'm here with a purpose, right? There's an agenda here, right? There's someone that sees what I'm doing. There's someone that put me here. It's a whole different perspective. So the first step isn't going out, but the first step actually is going inward to understand this entire vision, to appreciate how this is a structure of universal morality, and it's the moral DNA of humanity. That's what we have to really realize that. And what happens when we embrace the 7 Noahide laws is we end up having respect for life. We have respect for truth. How much respect is there for truth nowadays? Right? How much respect is there for life? Right? For property, for someone's property, right? That there shouldn't be theft, right? For justice, right? All of these things are really important. To respect these values is very important, and they're all reflected in the 7 Noahide laws. And when we teach them, we actually are teaching the world about them. There was a great commentary on the Talmud called the Meiri, and this is what he writes in text 10. Let's read text 10.
Anyone who engages in the study of the 7 Noahide laws, their principles, their details, and their applications, in which most of the Torah's core teachings are contained, is worthy of great honor, even as much as the high priest himself.
This is a major statement he's making. Is worthy of great honor, even as much as the high priest. The high priest was the Kohen Gadol, the one who led the entire service on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, we all come to synagogue. In the days of the temple, everyone went to the temple. And in the temple, one person ran the entire service. Everyone else pretty much stood there, interacted a little bit. But for the most part, it was one person doing everything, and that was the high priest. I mean, this is a man of great stature who had a very special role amongst the Jewish people. And the Meiri is saying that someone who studies the 7 Noahide laws is worthy of great honor, like the high priest. That is a very, very powerful statement. And part of the reason why is because many or most of the Torah's core teachings are actually contained and distilled in some way in the 7 Noahide laws. Now, of course, a Jew needs to to extend to the 613. But as a value system, the 7 Noahide laws pretty much distill it all right into there. Yeah. Thank God I wasn't there yet, so I cannot tell you. I don't know. It doesn't. My mind doesn't discuss it. What do you mean by special applications? Oh, obligations. We do. We have 613. So a person lives a life, and based on the way they live their life will determine where their level of the world to come begins, and then they ascend being there. They ascend. Yeah. You're saying, talking about justice, where's the justice? I'm going to tell you this. And this is some of you have heard this. For other of you, it may be very edgy, but I say this to almost every bar mitzvah boy. What happens on a boy's bar mitzvah? Their entire Jewish soul completely comes into them. Until then, they only have a partial Jewish soul. A Jewish soul is a distinct soul. Why would a Jew have a distinct soul? Why would the spiritual nature of a Jew be different than that of another person? Because he needs it and she needs it. So if her girl's at her bat mitzvah and the boy at her bar mitzvah, right? Why do we need it? Because we have 613 commandments. So God empowers us. He gives us the fuel, the power, the strength to be able to undertake that commitment. That's the fundamental idea, which if we live by the way, you'll have a lot more calmness in your life. God never asks of a person more than they can handle. And we're not going to go into the questions about that. I know there are a lot of questions we can ask about that. But as a general approach to life, you should always know this. When you find yourself in a trying situation, you have the resources you need. Okay? It may take you a year or 5 years or 10 years. And that's part of the process God may want you to go through, but you have the resources to get through it. God gave us the resources for 630 commandments, and that's the Jewish soul. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I would, I'm pretty confident that incorporated in the 7 Noahide laws is respecting one's parents. And while it may not be as strong a commandment as we have in the Torah, right? But I believe that if we follow the 7 Noahide laws, then a person will come to respecting their parents. And that's why it's a bedrock for morality. And that's why we're saying also it's a very general, these are very general rules or laws that incorporate a lot. And that's why we're going to break them down so we can see how they're much broader principles than just not bowing down to an idol. And we're going to actually begin doing that right now. Okay, we're going to start with the first two tonight. The first two tonight is not to bow down to idols, which really is, what's another way of saying don't worship idols? Flip that. Right? Worship one God, right? Don't worship idols, worship one God, right? And then it says, don't curse God. Now, How important do you think is like, okay, say the guy cursed God. Okay, so what? What, God's offended? Like what why is that so drastic? Why is that a moral value that one should not curse God? So we can explain, well, God's the creator of everything, if you don't respect God, but we're going to actually see a little bit more concretely, or a lot more concretely, how both believing in God and cursing God both will destroy the moral fabric of a society. That's the reason why it's so critical when we see, the founding fathers of the United States of America were believers in God. That's very, very critical, and I would say a large part of the success of our country. And when we disregard that, right, that's very, very problematic. It's much more problematic than we may realize. It's not like, well, you're a religious guy and you think they should. No, it's actually critical to the functioning of our society, and that's what we're going to see. We're going to get to right now. So let's begin with belief in God. Which is the first one, which is not to worship idols, or flipped on his head is to believe in God. And then we're going to discuss not cursing God. So Abraham was the one who brought monotheism, the belief in God, to the world, right? What was Abraham's story? So again, I know that some of you are familiar with this, but we're going to go through it. If you go to text 11a, let's read text 11a.
As soon as Abraham, this mighty soul, was weaned, he began to think on his own. Even as a young child, his mind would wander and question by day and by night. He had no teacher and no one to guide him. He was mired among the foolish idol worshippers of Ur-Kasdim. His father, his mother, and everyone around him served idols, and he too would join them. Yet his heart kept searching and his mind kept probing. Eventually, he discovered the true path through his own sound reasoning. Grasped what was right, he came to understand that there must be one God who created everything, and that among all that exists, there is no other God but him.
So Abraham was doing something that's really very dangerous. And by the way, most people would never, ever do this. And he was asking dangerous questions. And I say that they're dangerous because when you ask questions that question the foundation of people's belief system, you're threatening them. That's what you're doing. And that's what he was doing, not just to, the belief system of his father or his mother, the belief system of the entire society. He was questioning, which is a very dangerous thing to do, but he would not stop doing it. Who made man? Who made this idol? Right? Maybe we should be worshiping whoever made the idol. Very logical thinking. And then we have the famous story in text 11b, which if you don't know is a very important story to know. Let's read 11b.
So Terah was an idol maker and salesman. He once went out and left Abraham in charge of the shop. People would come in to buy idols, and Abraham would question them. How old are you? He'd ask. 50 or 60, they would reply. You poor fellow, Abraham would explain. Imagine that, a man of 60 bowing down to something made yesterday. Embarrassed, the customers would turn around and leave. A woman came in carrying a bowl of fine flour. Here, she said, offer this before them. Abraham took a stick, mashed all the idols, and placed the stick in the hands of the largest one. When Terah returned and saw the destruction, he demanded, who did this to my idols? I must be honest with you, Abraham replied. A woman bought an offering of flour. When I set it before them, they started fighting. One said, I'll eat first. The other said, no, I will. The biggest one got angry and grabbed the stick and smashed them all. Are you mocking me? Terah cried. You know they can't think or move. Abraham answered, listen to your own words.
Okay. So it's a really cute story. It does show us how entrenched society was in idolatry. I will say that from our perspective, it sounds silly, but these were not foolish people, and it wasn't silly. Okay, they came to believe these things, and part of what we're going to see tonight is that we believe very similar things. We're just in a modern form. We have our own idols in modern form, which are really in 500 years, people are going to look back at us and think we were the silliest people in the world in the same. But this is the nature actually of human beings. And Abraham was calling everyone out. And I would say that people who call people out about these idols today are usually mocked as well. So what ends up happening with Abraham. Abraham actually becomes a one-man campaign. He didn't even have a marketing team. Nothing. No billboards. But he begins to campaign this idea for this idea of God. Let's read text 11c.
Once Abraham recognized and understood the truth, he began to challenge the people of Ur Kasdim, debating with them and showing that their way was false. When his arguments prevailed, the king sought to put him to death, but a miracle occurred and Abraham escaped to Haran. There he began to call out with a mighty voice to all humanity, teaching that there is one God and that he alone is worthy of worship. He would travel from city to city and from kingdom to kingdom, proclaiming this message and gathering followers wherever he went. As people assembled around him and questioned his ideas, Abraham would explain according to their understanding, guiding them step by step until they came to recognize the truth. In time, thousands and tens of thousands joined him. These were the people of the house of Abraham, in whose hearts he firmly planted the great principle of faith.
Beautiful. So he begins spreading this message, and the Torah calls Abraham, Avraham ha-Ivri, Avram the Ivri, which is in the next reading. We're going to skip that reading, but he's called Avram Ivri, which Ivri means from the other side. Okay? And why is he called Avram Ivri? Because the whole world believes one thing and he believes the other. Yeah. Yes. No. They are righteous Gentiles. Yeah. And because really, Judaism didn't really fully start yet. It really starts at Mount Sinai. And this is a major discussion about when Judaism actually starts. Is Abraham, in fact, the first Jew? But he actually is the first Jew because God is now creating a seed line, which goes to Isaac, which goes to Jacob, which goes to the 12 tribes from Jacob. So Isaac has one righteous son, one wicked son. He has Esau and he has Jacob. Jacob follows in his way. Then Jacob has 12 sons. They all follow in his way, right? Despite some of the stories we read in the Torah, but they were very righteous people. And that forms a spiritual DNA, which shows up at Mount Sinai. God takes to Mount Sinai, obviously, and then God says, I select you as my people. But we still see it as originating from Abraham. Yeah. Okay. And Abraham is called Avram Ivri, the one who stands on the other side. Now, here is a very powerful message. In order to be able to do this work, in order to be able to be a Jew, we have to be willing to stand on the other side. And when we don't want to take that role, we also know that the world will force us to stand on the other side, right? So instead of being forced into it, we should go into it with grace, with confidence, right? With conviction. And that is really the role of the Jewish people, to be the people of God in this world, bringing God to the entire world. That's what we do. We bring God to the entire world. And so this is really the direction now that Abraham takes, which is a guiding, a guiding direction for every single one of us. Let's look at these two questions. Number one is this mission still relevant? Why is this a good question? What was Abraham bringing to the world? What? Monotheism, right? Today, most of the world believes in monotheism, right? So Abraham did a great job. Thank you, Abraham. We can take it easy, right? Is this still relevant today? That's question number one. And number two is, who really cares if there's one God or many gods? I mean, why is this so important that a human being believe that there's one God versus many gods? So what we want to understand is very concretely how it is that belief in one God is going to be a deciding factor between whether we have morality in the world or not. Okay, and it's going to be, and this is really I think the biggest power of the class. And we're first going to see how all of this idolatry evolved, because people didn't begin just simply by saying we need a God. We're going to start worshiping the moon. We're going to start worshiping the sun. We're going to start worshiping this, that, or whatever the gods they made. Because one can also ask, if God is good, the more the better, right? So if you look on page 24, you see, why does Judaism place such an emphasis on there being one God? How does this simplify or complicate our understanding of the world and our place in it? That's really what we want to understand. And when we look at the history of the world, the beginning of idolatry actually was sophisticated. What happened was the people living in the world noticed the grandeur of the world that God created, a magnificent, magnificent world, right? And in noticing that, they want to honor God. And how do you honor God? By honoring his awesome creations, especially the awesome creations that we see. So you say, what can I appreciate, God? I can appreciate this sun that rises every day, the moon that gives me light at night, right? Whatever it's the rain, the clouds, whatever all these different powerful forces, the wind, all these things are very powerful. And they began to worship them, but we know what happens. You begin worshiping things, and then the next generation begins to forgets about God and begins to think that these things are actually the powers themselves. That's actually, so there was this evolution that was happening that led them deeper and deeper into idolatry. And then there were false prophets that show up, because the ego of man always looks for power, and they start claiming that God spoke to me and told me that we should bow down to these things. You even had Nimrod, who was the king at the time of Abraham, who himself claimed he was the God or a God, right? And so they were putting this all on God. So you have God, you have God's servants, and suddenly you have false prophets and idols. And that's how things evolved with time. So what ends up happening is humanity is no longer looking outside of the universe. We are looking within the universe. We're looking at things within our universe as the gods. We no longer have a vision that's actually beyond us, that's greater than us, that's outside of us. Let's read text 13.
Idolatrous practice spread throughout the world. People worshipped images in every possible way, offering sacrifices to them and bowing before them. As the years passed, the honored and awesome name was forgotten, and none recognized him. The entire populace, women and children included, knew nothing other than the forms of wood and stone and the temples of masonry. From their earliest youth, they were trained to bow to these images, to serve them, and to swear by their names. Even the scholars and priests among them imagined that there was no God other than the stars and the heavenly spheres for whose sake these images had been fashioned.
Excellent. Give me 1 second, everyone, because before we show a video, and sorry about those interruptions, we just need to optimize this. And then share again. Okay. Okay. So what we're seeing from all of this is that people began to mistaken the outlet for the power plant. Right? That's exactly what was going on. People are mistaking the outlet for the power plant. And we'll take a closer look ourselves in just a minute. But Abraham, right? So Abraham looked beyond what meets the naked physical eye to the theological, philosophical, the soul's eye. And he began to recreate theology by taking people outside of our own selves. Because if we were created, something greater than us must be the source of who we are. And here we're going to see a video that actually shows us some of the modern version of idolatry.
We don't bow to idols anymore. We don't worship golden calves. But worship didn't disappear. It just changed shape. Today, we worship celebrities. If they wear it, we wear it. If they use it, we use it. We wait hours just to catch a glimpse of them. And we burn hours following every update of their lives. And the pull doesn't stop there. We also turn to money. We treat it like the end-all be-all, always wanting more, no matter how much we have. listening to people simply because they have a lot of it, trusting it to give us control, security, and happiness. And then there's success. We sacrifice time, health, and relationships for it. We fear losing it more than losing ourselves. We start to wonder who we are without it. So we say yes when we should say no, and we aren't there when we should be. Once bowing meant bending the knee. Now it means bending the mind. Of course, admiring talent isn't wrong. Liking things isn't wrong. Working hard isn't wrong. The real question is, what's ultimate? When God is in the picture, everything else finds its proper size.
If we pay close attention to what we just heard, this is so behind this idea, this truth about modern idolatry is really everything that we seek. Okay, it's really everything that we seek. What I mean by that is that the material of idols, that means the physical substance of idols, changed. It used to be stones, and now it's expensive aluminum that in the shape of an iPhone, right? But the mentality, so the material has changed. The mentality actually has not changed. If I believe that my boss controls my life in any way, my boss is an idol. I made my boss an idol. If I believe that my doctor, that my health will be determined by my doctor, then my doctor is an idol. If I believe that without money, right, I have no security, then money is my idol. The stock market. Some people believe it about the government. My social media following, right? Your house, whatever. It goes on and on and on. I think we all get the point. And the point is this: there is no problem having things. You have to hear this. There's no problem having things, and there's no problem having a lot of things. The problem is when the things have us. That's idolatry. And that, if we are all honest, beginning with myself, we all struggle with, right? So maybe the question is, how idolatrous am I? Right? But now we're becoming aware of it. And that's the reason why when we say, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God," the Lord is one, right? What are we saying? That there's one God, there aren't many gods? No, we're saying there is only God. There is only one. There's only one thing, and that is God. God is the end all be all of everything. That's the reason why when I go to my doctor, right? When I go to my doctor, I have a great time at my doctor, actually. So I actually like going to my doctor. It's a strange thing. But when someone goes to their doctor, you're going to the doctor as an agent of God to facilitate health, because God says that you should go to a doctor and I will send my blessing through the doctor, because that's natural means, right? But the doctor doesn't have the power. God has the power. And that's the reason why we can go to the very best surgeon in the world and it doesn't always work out, right? And the surgeon is not trusting that the surgeon did everything, did their best job, which they typically do. The surgeon's not to blame. The surgeon is doing their best, but they can only do their best. But the only one that can guarantee something is God. That's why there is only one God. And wouldn't this change a society if people were no longer worshiping other people and no longer worshiping money and no longer worshiping nonsense, right? Which we all do a little bit, right? And on and on and on. This is the power of monotheism. And that's why it radically changes a society when we actually believe in God. When we refuse to replace the creator with creation. That's what we do. We replace the creator with the creation. And this is a very exclusive relationship. So it's worthwhile to actually go through a reflection If you see on page 26, take a few minutes to write down any thoughts, feelings, or realizations that come to mind as you reflect on the following two questions. Don't rush. Well, we're going to rush a little bit, but you can do this when you get home. What is my idol of choice? Something specific in my life that I rely on more than I should. And how would my life change if I internalize the idea that there is only one God, only one power, and everything else in my life is a tool, an intermediary, or a blessing from him? I want to tell you something. You know what will happen if you and I actually embrace, internalize, which takes a life and a half, but internalize that there is only one God, that there's only one power, and nothing else has power over me? You know what happens? And this is going to lead us into the next point. We will be the most peaceful people in the world. Nothing is going to threaten you. Nothing is going to scare you. And challenges that come up in life, you're going to have in the context of God, and it's going to be a whole different experience. And this is the next point, and that is, without monotheism, what do we have? We have chaos. That's what we have. People live in, they're terror-stricken. Why is that? Because if you go back to, and I'm going to paraphrase some of the readings here, Rabbi Sachs explains very beautifully, when you had all the different gods, right, everyone was praying to their God to win over the other God. You have a chaotic world of competing forces, right? Who's going to win today? Oh, is my God going to, right? And then there are all these, one God controls this, one God controls that. This is the way people believe. And it creates a tremendous sense of fear and chaos because there are competing interests, there are rivalries, the world is filled with fear. Let's read text 14b.
The account of creation in the first chapter of Genesis is stunningly original, quite unlike any other in antiquity. There are no contending forces, no battles of the gods, no capricious spirits. God speaks and the universe comes into being. God is not in nature, but above it, transcending it and ordering it according to his word. Nature has no will or set of wills of its own.
Beautiful. This is really, really powerful. That's the whole power of Genesis and God creating the world, that God is above everything and God created everything, and God actually has power over everything, and there is nothing else that actually does. And we can go this idea we can go very deeply with, which we don't have time for tonight, but as Hasidic philosophy does. You know, atheists and agnostics are also believers. What do they believe in? Materialism. I'm not sure what materialism, each person is different, but that's what they believe in. They believe in their doctor, or they believe in their business, or they believe in their stockbroker, right? And all of these things. Yeah, oh, I don't believe in God. Sure, they believe in God. They believe in gods. That's what they believe in. Right. And you know what? When you live in a world like that, we all know, right? If you believe in your stockbroker, right? As if he can control the stock market, right? We live a life of anxiety because there is no security in anything. Nothing offers security. There's only one place of security, and that is God. That doesn't mean that our lives are going to be perfect and beautiful by any means. And it doesn't mean we're going to have major challenges, which I can guarantee you will, because that's part of the life that God gives us. But you know where it's all coming from, and you know that you're not a victim of randomness and chaos, but of a vision and a purpose that's being set out before you. And this is the reason why King David says, as you may be familiar with in Psalm 23, God is my shepherd, I will not lack. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. Even when I walk in the valley of death's shadow, I will fear no evil, for you, God, are with me. If you have to know King David's life story to know he walked in the shadow of death, literally, right? Literally, being chased by the king of Israel to be killed, right? The whole army. It's like, imagine, right? The king with his whole army is chasing one guy. He had David had a small group of people, right? How did he survive? Because God was with him. Not just because God was with him, because he lived with the awareness, the consciousness that God was with him. And therefore he was able to carry the greatest challenges that that a man can possibly have. So what we have from this is that when we when we believe in God, the power, the broad concept of believing in God is to understand that nothing has power in this world other than God. And that removes all of the chaos and fear and anxiety that it is so natural to us as physical human beings. And that's why we have to rise above this world. Now, let's go to cursing God. Okay? What's so terrible about cursing God? Right? So it seems like a minor offense, no major damages, it's just a belief, right? But actually, when someone curses God, we can begin to understand now that it's cosmic vandalism. You're vandalizing morality, actually. That's what happens when a person curses God. It also vandalizes meaning, because there is no meaning without God. And it vandalizes order, because we have chaos when we don't have God, as we now understand, at least on a basic level. And it's the foundation of confidence and responsibility. When we believe in God, and you know, we're slowly fleshing this out, but you know, within the constraints of our time, right? So with God, what do we have? We have responsibility. Oh, I was put here for a purpose. Do you know that the whole secret to being happy in life is living a life of responsibility? Meaning that I'm not trying to get out of life, I'm trying to put into life. That's the whole secret of happiness. I just gave it to you. The whole big secret, it's right there. I just gave it to you for free in 2 minutes as a side anecdote to tonight's class. You'll let me know how it goes, Joel. Right? And a person has confidence. Why do they have confidence? Because I know that nothing has power and control over me. I am with God, and that's the best I can do. Right? And this is the reason why, by the way, when the Torah and the Talmud discuss cursing God, you know how we have a euphemism for cursing God in Hebrew. You know what we call it? Birchat Hashem. What does Birchat Hashem mean? Blessing God, right? We won't even articulate the notion of cursing God. So whenever it says Birchat Hashem, we're in the context, we know that it's actually talking about cursing God. And we're going to get to another critical point. Yes. Being angry with God, cursing God, I mean, no, there's a huge difference. Being angry with God is not cursing God at all. Yeah. So being angry with God is part of our relationship with God. So people who go through different situations are often go through a period of being angry with God. Yeah. There's another very, very important point here. And the other very important point is that when someone curses God, they're not only rejecting God, but they're rejecting a very important aspect of God. And that is, whoops, do we have it up here? Yes, cursing God is rejecting God's goodness. Now, this is big, okay? This is big, but I'm going to just put it out there. It's sort of a little bit of a dump. I apologize, but it's really critical. God is good. Okay, God is good. I know, as well as you know, that we have moments where we have no understanding of that. I understand. And it doesn't change the truth, because my perception of things is not reality. God is good. When someone curses God, they are rejecting the idea. They say, I believe in God, so they're cursing God, right? Someone who's an atheist doesn't curse God. There's no God. Who are you cursing? Right? Like, that's why when people say, how could God have done this? I hate God. I don't believe in God, right? There's no one that believes in God as much as this guy, right? Because he doesn't stop talking about God, right? The atheist doesn't even get angry at God, right? But if someone gets angry at God and curses God, they believe in God, but they don't believe that God is good. Because if God is not good, God is unsafe and God is unpredictable. And that's not what monotheism is. Monotheism is that God is one and God is benevolent. Okay? And if you want to take that on, which you should, which you must, I would say, we all must. We must wrestle with this idea, right? As we get to the place of becoming more and more connected with God as the power of all and God being good, our lives will be a whole different level. It's a whole different level. And as a society, this is not only for the Jews, but this is for humanity. As a society, human beings will be completely different people. That's why we have it, verses in Psalms, text 17a, God is good to all. His compassion is upon all his creations. God is righteous in all his ways and benevolent in all his deeds, right? We have more in 17b. He carries out justice for the orphan and the widow. He loves the stranger, gives them bread and clothing. All of this is absolutely true. Even though we see things that we don't understand and don't know how to explain. Okay? When someone reads the Bible and says that the God of the Bible is an angry God, they're missing the whole Bible. They're really, it's a tragedy and a real corruption of the Bible, and especially of God. So Avram was this revolutionary who came to this awareness that there is one power in the world, there are no other powers. That this one power is good, is benevolent. And he started to teach this to everyone. And what he's doing in this process is he's redefining or adding maybe to the terminology that the Jewish people are the chosen people. We were chosen to abide by the 630 commandments, to be God, the divine agents in this world. Divine agents means to be the expression of the divine in this world. And a large part of it is to spread the universal moral code. That's part of our chosenness. Like the joke from the big Jewish movie play, from Fiddler on the Roof. The joke from Fiddler on the Roof, why don't you choose someone else once in a while, right? It's not such a joke, right? Like sometimes we know that being a Jew in this world comes with a heavy task, and it's not as if we needed to live 75 years ago to know it, right? There hasn't been a period in Jewish history where Jews did not know this. Even while we're living in democracy, we know this very clear, right? Every hour, if not every minute, we're being reminded of it. Because we have a major responsibility, and that's what we were chosen for. Right? Like anyone that complains about the Jews being a chosen people, I say, by all means, you want to step in? Yeah, but you want to go? We'll drop you in with your yarmulke in Gaza. Let us know how it works out. Right? So let's examine 3 very insightful texts. Okay, let's start with text 18.
And you will be for me a kingdom of priests. You will be a unique treasure to me in the sense that you will be a kingdom of priests whose mission is to guide and teach the entire human race, to call upon the name of God and to serve him with one purpose.
Beautiful. Martin, maybe you'll carry the next ones in just a minute, okay? But what is this telling us? When it says that we are a kingdom of priests, which is what we began the class with, where God told Moses to tell the Jewish people that we are a chosen people, we're a kingdom of priests, right? I always tell people, what you think this chosenness is some feather in our hat? We were chosen to carry a major responsibility, and we have to see it that way and undertake it that way. It's a major responsibility. It's glorious to be honored with this responsibility, but it's a responsibility, right? And that is to guide and teach the entire human race, to call upon the name of God. That's why I say we are the expressions of the divine in this world. And when someone sees us, they should see, as some Christians say, a man who's testifying. Like, they say when they see my yarmulke, they say, thank you for testifying, right? That's what they should see in every single Jew. That here's a man who lives by principles, right, and values, where clearly he believes in God. Let's read text 19a.
I, God, have called you with righteousness. I will strengthen your hand. I will protect you, and I will set you as a covenant for all people and a light unto the nations.
A light unto the nations. What does a light unto the nations mean? The nations don't need us to tell them about social justice. Okay? They don't need us to tell them about picking up litter on the side of highways. You don't need to be a Jew to enlighten the world to pick up litter on the side of the highways, right? That's not the Jewish mission. I'm not saying that that's a bad mission, but it's not the Jewish mission, right? And Jews can do that, and maybe Jews should do that, but it's not the Jewish mission. That's a human mission, right? The Jewish mission is to be a light unto the nations. What does that mean? Text 19b.
The Jewish people are destined to be a light unto the nations, as the verse states. Nations will go by your light. This refers to the light of the Torah, which will issue forth to them from Zion. The Jewish people will be the cause and the sustenance of the nations of the world, through guiding them to observe the 7 Noahide laws and to walk in the proper path, as the verse states. Multitudes of nations will go to each other and tell one another, "Come, let us ascend to the mountain of God, to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, so that we may walk in his paths."
The Jewish mission is a divine mission. It's not a material mission. It's a divine. It translates in material ways, but it's a divine mission, and that is to bring the awareness of God to the entire world. Exactly as it says over here. To walk in the proper path, and come, let us ascend to the mountain of God. All to understand that we are living with an awareness of God, and that is how we live our lives, and that begins for the entire world by abiding by the 7 Noahide laws. So we conclude today the first class, and looking forward to seeing you next week, same time, same place.